Abe Greenwald over at Commentary Magazine has a interesting piece about what ails America. Why do things seem so off? And of course, we've had challenging times in this country before, with war, with terrible government policy that wrongly subjugated some Americans. We know all this. But why do things seem so much more precarious to so many in 2023 than they did in 1973 or 1923, for that matter? About trust, he focuses on trust as Mr. Greenwald, and the disintegration of American institutions, the civic and cultural institutions that provide forum to our free society. And let me give you an example of why I think Greenwald is onto something, and an example of why we have this trust crisis, as he calls it. This is an exchange yesterday. I'm just going to present one side of it. But John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, had an exchange with our very own Dick Durbin about the lack of forthrightness from the FBI as it pertains to allegations that by an FBI whistleblower that the Bidens have been bribed by a Ukrainian oligarch. And Durbin makes the point, look, this 1023 with the allegation was unearthed during the Trump administration. So Bill Barr had access to this. And if Bill Barr and the Trump Department of Justice didn't see a there, well, then maybe it's because there isn't a there. And all of this is just so much conspiracy theorizing. This was Durbin's position. Here's Senator John Kennedy's response.
Once again, you have to consider this in context. You correctly described a 1023. When Senator Grassley first raised this issue, after the whistleblower came to him, the FBI wouldn't even acknowledge there was a 1023. Then the story changed. There was a 1023, but you can't see it. Yeah. Then the story changed. Okay, you can see the 1023, but we're going to heavily redact it. I suppose they didn't know Senator Grassley had seen the original document, but he knew what they redacted, which were the allegations about the tapes. Consider the context. I'm not going to go back through what I just said, but the American people are looking at all of this, and they just want an answer. I agree with you. We don't need a conspiracy. Let's end the conspiracy. But for the life of me, I can't understand why our Attorney General and our FBI Director can't come in front of the Judiciary Committee, in front of God and country, and answer Chuck and Lindsay's question. And if they say, we're investigating this, then we back off. If they say there was nothing to it, perhaps we should ask, okay, can you explain why? What's unreasonable about that, given our history over the past 5 years?
What is unreasonable about that? And by the way, that moving target that the FBI provided in terms of what they would concede and not concede, as memorialized by Kennedy there, that was compounded last week by that high-handed performance of Deputy Director Paul Abate before the same Senate Judiciary Committee. Abe Greenwald is the executive editor of Commentary Magazine, and he joins us now. Abe Greenwald, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So as you heard John Kennedy detail there, it's examples like this that lead to not just a loss of trust, a hostility toward institutions that you would otherwise, once upon a time, maybe even 6 or 7 years ago, have given the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think it's a whole range of institutions. Everything from the FBI and the Justice Department to our public health officials, to the medical and educational establishment. They've sort of failed us, and in their arrogance, they have covered up their failings, lied about them in some cases, and yes, they no longer get the benefit of the doubt in the public mind. I think to a much greater extent than before. It's not that no one believes the official story, as I say, on a given topic anymore, but fewer and fewer Americans are inclined to do so, given what's gone on in recent years, especially everything since 2020 and the pandemic.
Right, and we were just mentioning before you joined us this remarkable apology that was offered by the Premier of Alberta, Canada, in terms of how the unvaxxed were treated up there in her neck of the woods. I mean, something that you have not heard, will not hear, I suspect, from those who were the most aggressive Trudeau-style COVIDian lockdown politicians at the gubernatorial level, at the congressional level. It's the old saying, a little humility goes a long way, but humility is in short supply in our politics.
Yeah, well, humility has always been in short supply in our politics. It's that during the pandemic, though, this was an opportunity for the experts, the people with advanced degrees in topics that a lot of us don't know a whole lot about. This was their moment to shine. This was their life's work. If you were a virologist or toiling away in infectious diseases, you suddenly had the public's ear, and you made the most of it. And so it's not even strictly politicians and their lack of humility that we're talking about here. It's this expert class that showed up, made pronouncements, got many things wrong, were dishonest about many other things, and sort of slinked away as everything sort of subsided.
Yeah,
it was their Super Bowl. And Dr. Fauci, I mean, he made millions of dollars, and is he ever going to be held accountable?
Well, Fauci to me is such an interesting case because he's the perfect example because he's sort of gone from the public eye right now.
Yeah.
He's removed himself from center stage, just as recent investigations are really making clear that the origins of the virus were overwhelmingly likely the lab in Wuhan. I mean, we've gotten to the point in some of these investigations where they can pinpoint the first sort of 3 scientists in Wuhan who came down with it in the fall of 2019.
So the imposition of their will on people who don't know better was their attitude. It continues to be their attitude. So how can that breed anything other than mistrust? And where do you think this leads?
Well, I think we've sort of seen where it leads. Unfortunately, one aspect of our trust crisis is that as we've lost trust in let's call it the establishment and the expert class and the official story, is that conspiracy theorists, people offering alternative ideas and alternative facts have popped up, and they're peddling a different set of falsehoods. But people are much more willing to believe those just because they don't trust the official story anymore. I can understand this to some degree, but I think it's also a mistake.
Well, right, but it's hard to give somebody much attention when they lead with "you're an insurrectionist." They lead with "you're a threat to our democracy." They lead with "you're Typhoid Mary." That's not exactly a good opening for a conversation about anything important, is it?
Well, I'd have to know in particular what you're talking about, but
Well, what do you mean? What I'm talking about?
when you say they lead with,
they lead.
lead with, what do you mean they lead with?
They lead with that January 6th. Everybody at January 6th is an insurrectionist. By extension, MAGA supporters are insurrectionists. The FBI is penning memos of about monitoring conservatives conservative Catholics who attend the Latin Mass. They're characterizing parents who attend school board meetings to protest COVID policies or curriculum choices as rabble rousers, if not threats to the public order. Oh my gosh, school board members are under assault and so on and so forth. This is an illiberal faction of people. I mean, the stories are legion here.
Well, I certainly agree with you that the idea that that the sort of terrorist warnings about concerned parents and things of that nature are disgusting and dangerous. But you'll get no sympathy for January 6th rioters from me. So
I'm not asking for sympathy for January 6th rioters. I'm saying that everybody who attended January 6th, number one, wasn't a rioter, and that's being mischaracterized. Number two, you wouldn't have to be a January 6th if you are MAGA adjacent. If you were a Trump voter, you owe the nation an apology per Rachel Maddow and anybody else on MSNBC's Primetime Lion, but so forth. I mean, the clear effort afoot was to characterize anybody who is party to Trump and even just in the simple act of voting as a threat to democracy, or somebody who was a participant in undermining our democracy.
Look, I think that the claims about the threat to democracy are ridiculous and political. And histrionic, but I also feel the exact same way about the claims about rigged elections on the right. So, and that is my point about what happens when trust devolves, is that we see it coming from all sides, and nonsensical stories get picked up, and people have faith in the wrong ideas.
What did you think about Barack Obama's recent pronouncements? Once he was done calling for digital fingerprints to monitor misinformation, he moved over to trying to diminish Tim Scott, saying this of Senator Scott: "I think there's a long history of African American or other minority candidates within the Republican Party who will validate America and say everything is great and we can all make it." And he said, "I'm not being cynical about Tim Scott individually. I may be suggesting that the rhetoric of 'can't we all get along' has to be undergirded with an honest accounting of our past and our present," as if Tim Scott is unwilling to offer an honest accounting of our past and present. That's just a fancy way of calling Tim Scott an Uncle Tim, as the more aggressive on the left are willing to call him. And so the deterioration of race relations that really started to nosedive with the ascension of Barack Obama.
Well, I mean, I think it's a pathetic statement. Tim Scott doesn't pretend that America is perfect, but he doesn't deny that America is great and that the country has made great progress. I think the sort of the racial tensions that you speak of, I don't know that it kicked up around Obama's election exactly. I mean, to me, once again, 2020 is the year that sort of broke the back of American trust, not only with things having to do with the pandemic, but then around the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter riots and all the dishonesty about that, and then the institutional accusations that everyone was a bigot and that we needed sensitivity training and that, we had unconscious bias. We were bigots even if we didn't know it. To me, those are all deep manifestations of the trust crisis.
Oh, I agree, but I mean, just the survey results. Of CNN, 54% say relations between blacks and whites gotten worse since Obama became president, including 57% of whites and 40% of blacks. That's up sharply from a year earlier. That's from 2016. So in his second term, I mean, he certainly when there was promise that he was going to be someone who advanced racial comity, and he did not. And then, of course, then it fell off the table with the events that you discussed. So, I mean, in terms of speaking of fingerprints, in terms of fingerprints on this disintegration of trust and the accompanying problems, Barack Obama certainly bears his share of culpability. And since he's inserting himself into 2023 and 2024's election, I thought we should include him in the conversation.
I don't like what Barack Obama did as president. I don't hold him accountable for racial strife in the country, though, at all. The other thing that happened around that time, I guess around 2012, 2013 or so, was when the Black Lives Matter movement got started. And I think that was far more ruinous for race relations than anything that came out of the White House, out of the Obama White House, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, although identitarianism also got its modern advent within that administration, it persists to this day. Of course, it's been greatly enhanced, and identitarianism is, by definition, balkanizing, isn't it? So if you want to distrust people, now you distrust people based on their identity, not their conduct or their belief systems.
Oh, it's completely poisonous. And this is the left in general is obsessed with group identity. When of course the way through to a more fair America where everyone has more opportunity is to assess everyone on an individual basis, and that is very much fallen out of favor on the left generally. Yeah.
I mean, remember when President Obama said if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin?
Yeah, I have to. Again, that doesn't particularly offend me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There are a great many things Obama did that I take issue with, but I don't see him as having exacerbated race relations in this country. I just don't.
Abe Greenwald, executive editor, Commentary Magazine. Abe Greenwald, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When this is the sound of a waterfall in nature, there's no cause for concern. But when it's the sound of water gushing through your living room ceiling because a pipe bursts inside the wall, there's reason to panic unless you pick up the phone and call 1-800-SERVPRO. Only the cleanup and restoration specialists at ServPro can help make fire and water damage like it never even happened. So make the call to 1-800-SERVPRO at the first